certainly one of the signs of the modern age that we live in is a kind of ceaseless predilection towards utopian ideologies. And unfortunately, a lot of religious thought in modernity has also kind of been caught up in this. And it makes you wonder, to quote a modern cultural idiom, who is zooming who? A lot of religious thought has definitely been highly influenced and co-opted by not only liberal but also conservative, because you will find within some conservative strains utopian ideologies, the idea that somehow society can be refashioned by man, even though it is inspired by the Word of God, into some sort of utopian paradise. And of course, on the other end, on the liberal side of the spectrum, there's the notion that somehow we can perfect society by ourselves, without God. So both of these sort of political philosophies continued to kind of fight back and forth with one another. And unfortunately, a lot of religious thought, including our community, the Muslim community, has also been kind of caught up in this. And you will see the same striations that you would find, say, in the Christian community and its secular counterpart, similar within the Muslim community. And I personally, I think that's really why we have not seen any success from any of these so-called religious revolutions that have tried to refashion society according to a particular understanding of religion to somehow make a paradise on earth or a utopian perfect society. But we also see the same coming kind of from the secular and from the left. So when I was driving this morning, running some errands, they had a program on one of the NPR channels here, and some politician who was talking about environmentalism and how we needed to make changes based upon the scientific knowledge we have about what's happening with environmental degradation. And it reminded me of a verse, again in the 42nd chapter of the Quran, in Surah Ash-Shura, in which actually, which problematizes this idea of knowledge being the end-all and the be-all of which somehow we will be able to unite around. And so in this verse, the Quran says, وَمَا تَفَرَّقُوا إِلَّا مِن بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَهُمُ الْعِلْمُ بَغْيًا بَيْنَهُم. And that, groups did not differ. They did not differ amongst one another until knowledge had come to them, بَغْيًا بَيْنَهُم. And then it caused all of this, chaos and mischief. So one of the problems I see of many different utopian ideologies is there is some special knowledge out there that if we can somehow grasp onto it and make use of it, which would almost inevitably involve some kind of coercion upon others, then somehow we can create a utopian society, or that knowledge itself is what will unite us. And actually the Quran then continues and rebuttals, وَلَوْلَا كَلِمَةٌ سَبَقَتْ مِنْ رَبِّكَ إِلَى أَجَلٍ مُسَمًّى لَقُضِيَ بَيْنَهُم. But if it actually weren't for a gentle word that had proceeded from your Lord until an appointed time, then the affair would have been disastrous and it would have been a wrap. And this is something for us to remember and remind ourselves that knowledge is important, but knowledge in and of itself, particularly this is one of the issues I have with both the liberal and the conservative secular, because sometimes when we talk about, secularism, it somehow, I think, gets misconstrued that the secular is only somehow the purview or the domain of the liberal, but there's also conservative secularism as well. But this idea that somehow if we just have, that knowledge in itself will be the thing that will unite us, and that the Quran is actually saying something quite different, that knowledge in and of itself is, not only going to be the thing that won't unite you, but it in fact can even become a source of contention, and that there's something even further that's needed underneath knowledge that will give unity. In addition to this, one of the other things that I see as a detrimental byproduct of utopian ideology is conflating unity for uniformity. And this goes both within groups that, say, share the same basic fundamental ideals and values, and then, of course, opposing groups that may not share the same underlying fundamental values. So let's just take the first one. As Muslims, we all believe in La ilaha illallah. We believe that there's no deity to worship except for Allah, and that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and blessings be upon him, is the final prophet and messenger. However, that unity is sometimes beleaguered by a misconstruing of unity for uniformity, meaning that anybody that believes in La ilaha illallah and Muhammad abduhu wa rasuluhu, anybody that believes in no God but Allah and that Muhammad is the final messenger, then that will manifest to be uniformly recognizable, that there will not be variations in that. Just over the last day, because we just passed the 15th of Sha'aban, that I saw a number of people online engaging in really, counterproductive arguments, and that there is, ample evidence that there isn't anything that is obviously recommended about certain acts of worship, especially putting a specific emphasis on it, and in particular in a group setting. And yet I saw people going to excessive lengths in arguing, and I think this does come from this misconstruing of being unified, that we all believe in La ilaha illallah, Muhammad abduhu wa rasuluhu, but we have different methodologies of determining what is orthodox and not. And it's not because I'm not trying to say that there isn't perhaps a broader orthodoxy out there, but we have to prioritize unity over uniformity. And matter of fact, I think we have to dispel the notion that we can have unity and uniformity. It just simply isn't going to happen. We are varied and very diverse as human beings, and therefore we're not going to have uniformity, because one, that's clearly not what Allah's design is. He didn't make us all the same, and it doesn't mean that there are not incontrovertible truths, but certainly one of the one of the problems as it manifests in our community of uniformity as an extension of utopian ideology is just simply an unwillingness to recognize one's limits as a human being. And that what we often try to do is subjugate one another. Subjugation is solely within the domain of God. Only Allah has the right to subjugate His creation. And I think that is a little bit of what we just saw, in Sri Lanka, in New Zealand, and with many other public acts of violence, is an unwillingness to leave subjugation to the Creator and And instead, we should just be focusing on submitting. And in doing so, I think we can make the world a safer space, with having to acknowledge that not everybody is going to think and believe as we do, and that's kind of okay, and that all of those differences will all be settled on one great and enormous day, and we should be busy with preparing ourselves for that meeting. And in doing so, I think we could make things a lot better. And certainly even just between us as Muslims, I think we could really make our relationships between one another a lot better. So, in one of the other videos, I talked about how to go about making this Ramadan not only a better experience for yourself, but for others in the community, is, leave the subjugation for the one that it is his right to subjugate, and we are his subjects, and we are his ibad, and it is our obligation and duty to submit to him. So just some words of reflection, how, again, if you read this book, it really does give you some potent insights on enduring challenges to the human condition, and how we can at least take steps and strides to try to overcome them. Wa jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum.